The first light of dawn crept over the distant mountains, painting the horizon with delicate strokes of orange and gold. Shadow, a once proud Mustang with a midnight black coat and a white diamond marking on his forehead, stood motionless in the corner of a ramshackle corral. His once gleaming coat was now dull and patched with mud, his powerful frame reduced to a skeletal silhouette against the morning light. His head hung low, nearly touching the dusty ground, as if the weight of his spirit had finally become too much to bear. The ranch he called home was a desolate place. Cracked earth, sparse vegetation, and a pervasive sense of neglect that seemed to touch everything. Frank Willard, the ranch owner, had once been a respected horse breeder, but years of drought, mounting debts, and a deepening affair with whiskey had transformed him into a bitter shell of a man. His frustration and anger often found their target in Shadow, the last valuable horse he owned. Shadow's ears twitched as he heard the familiar crunch of boots on gravel. Every muscle in his body tensed, preparing for what had become a daily ritual of cruelty. Frank appeared, silhouetted against the rising sun, a leather whip dangling from his right hand and a half-empty bottle clutched in his left. His walk was unsteady, his eyes bloodshot and narrowed with contempt. "Still standing, you worthless beast?" Frank's voice was a raspy growl. He took another swig from the bottle before tossing it aside, where it shattered against a fence post. "Time to earn your keep." Shadow backed away, pressing himself against the weathered boards of the corral. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide from the inevitable. Frank raised the whip and brought it down with a sharp crack. Shadow flinched as the leather bit into his flank, leaving yet another mark to join the constellation of scars that mapped the history of his suffering. "You're gonna break today," Frank muttered, striking again, "or I swear I'll sell you to the slaughterhouse." A few miles away, in a modest house at the edge of the small town of Dry Creek, Emma Sullivan sat at her kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee and staring at the stack of unpaid bills before her. At 32, Emma had already weathered more storms than most people face in a lifetime. She'd lost her parents in a car accident when she was 25, and her husband, David, had been deployed overseas with the military, only to return with injuries that eventually claimed his life 2 years ago. Now, she was running the small veterinary clinic they had started together, struggling to keep it afloat in a region where most people could barely afford to feed themselves, let alone care properly for their animals. The drought that had gripped the area for the past 3 years had only made things worse, driving away many of the ranchers who had been her most reliable clients. Emma ran a hand through her auburn hair and sighed. The bank was threatening to foreclose on the clinic if she couldn't make a payment by the end of the month. She had already taken on side jobs, working evenings at the local diner and weekends at the feed store. But it wasn't enough. Something had to change, and soon. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She glanced at the clock, barely 6:30 a.m. Who would be calling at this hour? Emma pushed back her chair and made her way to the door, peering through the peephole before opening it. "Maya?" she said, surprised to see her 19-year-old neighbor standing on her porch, still in her pajamas, her dark hair disheveled. "What's wrong?" Maya's eyes were wide with urgency. "It's happening again, Emma. That man is beating his horse. I can hear it from my window." Maya lived on the property adjacent to Frank Willard's ranch and had been reporting his cruelty to Emma for months. Emma's jaw tightened. She had reported Frank to the local sheriff multiple times, but nothing ever came of it. Sheriff Calhoun was an old friend of Frank's, and in his eyes, a man had the right to treat his property however he saw fit, even if that property was a living, breathing animal. "I'll go over there," Emma said, already reaching for her jacket. "Can you call Dr. Martinez and tell him I might be late opening the clinic this morning?" Maya nodded, and Emma grabbed her keys and medical bag before heading to her truck. As she drove the dusty road toward Frank's ranch, her mind raced with possibilities. What could she do this time that would make any difference? Frank wouldn't listen to reason, and the law wasn't on her side. But she couldn't just stand by and let that beautiful Mustang suffer. Emma had seen Shadow only a handful of times, but the horse's plight had touched something deep within her. Perhaps it was the way he still held his head high despite the abuse, or the intelligence that shone in his dark eyes. Whatever it was, she felt a connection to this animal that she couldn't explain. As she pulled up to Frank's property, she could see him in the corral, whip in hand, while Shadow cowered in the corner. Emma's blood boiled. She parked her truck and strode toward the corral, her medical bag clutched tightly in one hand. "Frank!" she called out, her voice steady despite the anger churning inside her. "That's enough." Frank turned, his face contorting with annoyance when he recognized her. "Get off my property, Sullivan. This ain't your business." "When you're abusing an animal, it becomes my business," Emma replied, stepping closer to the corral fence. "I'm a veterinarian, and I'm telling you that horse needs medical attention, not a whipping." Frank spat on the ground. "This horse is stubborn as hell. Won't let nobody ride him, won't pull his weight. He's mine, and I'll do what I want with him." Emma took a deep breath, trying to keep her composure. "Let me take a look at him at least. He might be in pain, which could explain his behavior." "You think I don't know horses?" Frank's face flushed with anger. "My family's been raising them for generations. I don't need some woman telling me what to do." "Times have changed, Frank. We know more about horse behavior and health than we used to. Please, just let me examine him." Frank seemed to consider her words for a moment, his bloodshot eyes narrowing. Then he shook his head. "You got 10 minutes. After that, you get out of here and don't come back." Emma nodded, not wanting to push her luck. She entered the corral cautiously, speaking softly to Shadow, who watched her with wary eyes. "It's okay, boy. I'm not going to hurt you." As she approached, she could see the extent of his injuries, fresh welts across his flanks, old scars that had never properly healed, and signs of malnutrition in his protruding ribs and dull coat. Shadow trembled as she reached out her hand, but he didn't bolt. Instead, he seemed to be assessing her, those intelligent eyes taking in every detail. "What did they do to you?" Emma whispered, her heart breaking for this magnificent creature who had endured so much suffering. Slowly, carefully, she began her examination, all too aware of Frank's impatient presence behind her and the ticking clock on her brief window of intervention. Little did Emma know that this encounter would be the first step on a journey that would change not only Shadow's life, but her own as well. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, threats, and unexpected allies. But in that moment, all that mattered was the connection forming between a wounded woman and a mistreated Mustang, a connection that somehow felt like the beginning of healing for them both. Emma worked quickly, her trained hands moving with gentle precision over Shadow's body. The Mustang remained tense but didn't pull away, as if he somehow understood she was trying to help. She documented the wounds, both fresh and old, taking photos with her phone while Frank wasn't looking. The horse was severely malnourished, his water trough nearly empty and filled with algae. The hay in his feeding area was moldy and sparse. "His back left hoof has an abscess," Emma said, keeping her voice professional despite the anger simmering inside her. "It needs to be drained and treated with antibiotics. That's probably why he won't let you ride him, Frank. He's in pain." Frank scoffed. "He's just stubborn. Always has been." Emma straightened up, meeting Frank's bloodshot eyes. "I can treat him right now if you'll let me. It won't cost you anything." She knew offering free treatment was the only way Frank might agree. Frank checked his watch and spat on the ground. "Fine. Do what you gotta do. But make it quick. I got business in town." Emma returned to her truck and brought back her medical supplies. Shadow watched her every move, his ears flicking back and forth. She spoke to him continuously in a low, soothing voice as she cleaned the abscess and administered antibiotics. The Mustang flinched when she touched the tender area but remained surprisingly still for the procedure. "I'll need to come back tomorrow to check on this," Emma told Frank as she packed up her supplies. It was a risky move. She had no guarantee he would allow her on his property again. Frank grunted, already heading toward his rusted pickup truck. "Whatever, just don't get in my way." Emma waited until Frank's truck disappeared in a cloud of dust before turning back to Shadow. "I'll be back," she promised, reaching out slowly to stroke his neck. To her surprise, the Mustang leaned slightly into her touch, a gesture so subtle she might have imagined it. "Stay strong." Back at her clinic, Emma went through the motions of her day, vaccinating dogs, treating a cat with an upper respiratory infection, advising a young couple on the care of their new puppy. But her mind kept returning to Shadow, to those intelligent eyes that seemed to hold a world of unspoken suffering. During her lunch break, she called the county animal control office again, though she had little hope they would act. As expected, the response was the same. Without more evidence of severe abuse or neglect, there was nothing they could do. A horse with an untreated abscess and some whip marks wasn't enough to warrant intervention, especially on the property of a man with connections in the small community. That evening, Emma drove out to see Maya, hoping the teenager might have more information about Frank's routine. Maya's family owned the property adjacent to Frank's, and the girl had a clear view of his corral from her bedroom window. "He leaves every Tuesday and Thursday around noon," Maya told her, twisting a strand of dark hair around her finger. "Doesn't come back until late. I think he goes to the bar in Westfield. That's what my dad says anyway." Emma nodded, a plan beginning to form in her mind. It was Tuesday today, which meant she had 2 days to figure out her next move. Has he ever mentioned selling the horse? Or any other plans for him? Maya's expression darkened. "Last week I heard him on the phone. He was drunk, talking about sending some horse to the slaughterhouse if he couldn't break him soon. I'm pretty sure he was talking about Shadow." Emma's heart sank. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made the situation even more urgent. "Thanks, Maya. Keep an eye on them for me, will you? And call me if anything changes." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, images of Shadow's abused body and soulful eyes haunting her. By morning, she had made a decision. It was risky, possibly illegal, but she couldn't see any other option. She would save Shadow, whatever it took. Wednesday passed in a blur of appointments and preparations. Emma called in a favor from an old friend who owned a small horse farm about 50 miles away, securing a safe place for Shadow if she could get him out. She purchased supplies, a halter, lead rope, wound ointment, feed supplements, and packed them in her truck. Thursday morning dawned bright and clear. Emma opened the clinic as usual but told her assistant she might need to leave early for an emergency call. At 11:30, she received a text from Maya. "He just left. Truck heading toward highway." Emma's heart raced as she quickly finished up with her current patient, a golden retriever with a minor ear infection. She gave instructions to the owner, then grabbed her keys. "I've got to go out on a call," she told her assistant. "Can you handle things here for a few hours?" 20 minutes later, Emma pulled up to Frank's property, parking her truck out of sight behind a cluster of scrubby trees. She sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, second-guessing herself. What she was about to do could cost her her veterinary license, or worse. But then she thought of Shadow, of the slaughterhouse that awaited him if she did nothing, and her resolve hardened. Emma approached the corral cautiously, keeping an eye out for any sign of activity around the dilapidated ranch house. The property seemed deserted, just as Maya had predicted. Shadow stood in his usual corner, head down, but his ears perked up as Emma drew near. "Hey, boy," she said softly. "Remember me? I'm going to help you." The Mustang watched her climb over the fence, his body tense but not retreating. Emma moved slowly, holding out her hand, allowing him to catch her scent. After a moment, Shadow took a tentative step toward her, then another. "That's it," Emma encouraged. "You can trust me." She slipped the halter over his head, speaking soothingly the entire time. Shadow accepted it without resistance, as if he somehow understood that this moment was different, that something important was happening. Emma checked his hoof, relieved to see the abscess was already looking better. She applied more ointment, then gently brushed some of the dried mud from his coat. "We're getting out of here," she told him, clipping the lead rope to the halter. "But I need you to work with me, okay?" Leading a horse who had likely been abused whenever he was handled was no easy task, but to Emma's amazement, Shadow followed her with minimal coaxing. They moved slowly across the property toward her truck, where Emma had laid out a ramp she had borrowed from a client. "Up you go," she encouraged, giving the lead rope a gentle tug. Shadow hesitated, eyeing the trailer with suspicion. Emma stroked his neck, continuing to talk to him in a calm, reassuring voice. "I know it's scary, but I promise you're safe with me." After what seemed like an eternity, Shadow took a tentative step onto the ramp. Then another, and another, until he was fully inside the trailer. Emma secured him quickly, her hands shaking with adrenaline. She had done it. She had actually done it. As she pulled away from Frank's property, Emma glanced in her rearview mirror at the Mustang. His eyes met hers through the trailer window, and in that moment, she felt a connection that transcended words. They were both taking a leap of faith. Shadow trusting this human who had appeared in his life, and Emma risking everything to save a horse she barely knew. The drive to her friend's farm was tense, every passing car making Emma's heart race with the fear of being discovered. But they made it without incident, arriving just as the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the rolling pastures. Mark Townsend, Emma's old college friend and experienced horse rehabilitator, was waiting for them at the gate. His expression grew serious as he helped Emma unload Shadow and saw the condition of the Mustang. "My God, Emma, what happened to this horse?" "A lifetime of abuse," Emma replied, her voice catching. "I had to get him out of there, Mark. They were going to send him to slaughter." Mark's eyes widened. "You stole him? Emma, do you have any idea how much trouble you could be in?" Emma nodded, the full weight of her actions finally hitting her. "I know, but I couldn't just leave him there to die. Look at him, Mark. Look at what they did to him." Mark's expression softened as he took in Shadow's scarred body and wary eyes. After a long moment, he sighed. "All right, we'll figure something out. But for now, let's get this guy settled in and properly cared for." As they led Shadow to a clean, spacious stall with fresh hay and water, Emma felt a mix of relief, fear, and something else, a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced since David died. Whatever happened next, she knew she had made the right choice. Shadow was safe, at least for now. The news spread through Dry Creek like wildfire. By the time Emma returned to town the following morning, it seemed everyone knew that Frank Willard's Mustang had disappeared. She tried to maintain her normal routine, opening the clinic at 8 sharp and greeting her first patient with a smile that felt strained at the edges. Her assistant, Louisa, gave her curious looks throughout the morning but didn't ask questions, for which Emma was grateful. Shortly before noon, the bell above the door jangled, and Sheriff Calhoun stepped into the waiting room. His weathered face was set in stern lines, the brim of his hat pulled low over his eyes. Emma's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her expression neutral as she finished administering a vaccine to Mrs. Peterson's terrier. "There you go, all done," she said, handing the dog back to its owner. "Remember to watch for any signs of reaction, though it's very rare." Mrs. Peterson thanked her and hurried out, nodding nervously to the sheriff as she passed. Emma took a deep breath and turned to face him. "Sheriff Calhoun, what can I do for you today?" The sheriff removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "I think you know why I'm here, Dr. Sullivan. Frank Willard reported his horse stolen yesterday. Says you were out at his place earlier this week, showing an unusual interest in the animal." Emma had prepared for this moment, rehearsing her response in her mind. "I treated the horse for an infected abscess in his hoof. Purely professional interest, I assure you. Is Frank sure the horse was stolen? Mustangs are known for their intelligence. Maybe it found a way out of that dilapidated corral." Sheriff Calhoun's eyes narrowed slightly. "Frank says that corral was secure, and he seems to think you had something to do with the animal's disappearance." "That's absurd," Emma replied, injecting just the right amount of indignation into her voice. "I'm a veterinarian. My job is to care for animals, not steal them." The The sheriff studied her face for a long moment. Mind if I take a look around? Check your property? Your clinic? Do you have a warrant? Emma asked, surprised by her own boldness. A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed Calhoun's features. No, ma'am, I don't. Just following up on a complaint. Then I'm afraid I can't consent to a search, Emma said, her heart pounding. I have patients to see, and I value their privacy. If Frank wants to file formal charges, that's his right. But I had nothing to do with his horse going missing. After another long, uncomfortable moment, the sheriff nodded and replaced his hat. All right, Dr. Sullivan, but this isn't over. Frank's mighty upset, and he's got friends in this town. So do I, Emma replied quietly. After the sheriff left, Emma retreated to her office and closed the door, her hands shaking as the adrenaline drained from her system. She had just lied to a law enforcement officer, a federal offense, but the alternative, confessing and letting Shadow be returned to Frank's cruelty, was unthinkable. She pulled out her phone and called Mark. The sheriff was just here, she said without preamble when he answered. They're looking for Shadow. Are you okay? Mark's concern was evident even through the phone. For now, but we need a plan. If they find him at your place, they won't, Mark assured her. I've moved him to the back pasture. It's not visible from the road, and I told the hands to keep quiet. He paused. Emma, I've been thinking. This is only a temporary solution. Frank's not going to give up easily, especially if he suspects you took the horse. Emma sighed, rubbing her temples where a headache was beginning to form. I know. I'm trying to figure out our next move. I might have an idea, Mark said slowly. My cousin works for a wild horse sanctuary in Montana. They take in Mustangs that would otherwise be sent to slaughter. If we could get Shadow there, he'd be legally protected, and they have the resources to rehabilitate him properly. Hope flickered in Emma's chest. Montana is pretty far. How would we get him there without being stopped? Leave that to me, Mark replied. I know some people who owe me favors. But Emma, there's something else you should know about Shadow. Emma frowned. What is it? I had a feeling about him, so I checked for a freeze brand last night. It was hard to see under all that dirt and matted hair, but it's there. This isn't just any Mustang, Emma. He's from the Wielder herd, one of the most historically significant wild horse populations in the country. The Bureau of Land Management has been trying to protect them for years. Emma's breath caught. The Wilder Mustangs were legendary for their beauty, intelligence, and the unique genetic lineage that could be traced back to the Spanish horses brought to America centuries ago. Are you sure? Positive. And here's the thing, if Frank acquired him legally, he would have documentation from the BLM adoption program. If he doesn't, then he's the one who broke the law, not me, Emma finished, her mind racing with the implications. But how would Frank get his hands on a protected Mustang illegally? That's what we need to find out, Mark said. It could be our leverage. After ending the call, Emma sat at her desk, her thoughts swirling. If Shadow truly was a Wilder Mustang, and if Frank had obtained him illegally, it changed everything. The theft of a federally protected animal was a serious offense, carrying heavy fines and even jail time. But proving it would be another matter entirely. She needed more information, and she knew just where to start. That evening, after closing the clinic, Emma drove to the Double R Saloon on the outskirts of town. It was a dingy establishment frequented by ranch hands and truckers passing through, and it was Frank Willard's favorite watering hole. Emma rarely set foot in such places, but tonight she had a purpose. She slipped inside, trying to be inconspicuous in her jeans and plain blue shirt, her auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. The bar was dimly lit and smelled of stale beer and cigarette smoke, despite the smoking ban that had been in place for years. A few heads turned as she entered, but most of the patrons were too focused on their drinks or the ancient television mounted in the corner to pay her much attention. Emma spotted her target immediately, Joe Simmons, an older man who had worked on and off for Frank for years. Joe was sitting alone at the bar, nursing what appeared to be whiskey. Emma had treated his dog once, free of charge when Joe was going through hard times. He had never forgotten that kindness. She slid onto the stool next to him. "Evening, Joe." Joe looked up, surprise flickering across his weathered face. "Dr. Sullivan, this ain't your usual stomping ground." Emma ordered a beer she had no intention of drinking. "I was hoping to run into you, actually. I have a question about Frank's Mustang." Joe's expression turned guarded. "Heard it went missing. Sheriff was asking around about it today." "Yes, that's what I want to talk about. That horse. Where did Frank get him?" Joe took a long swallow of his whiskey, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "Why do you want to know?" Emma leaned closer. "Because I think it might be a wilder Mustang, and if it is, there's a chance Frank didn't acquire him through proper channels." Joe's eyes widened slightly, confirming Emma's suspicions. "You didn't hear this from me," he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "But about 3 years ago, Frank got into some trouble with gambling debts, owed money to some dangerous people. He disappeared for a week, said he was going on a hunting trip, came back with that black Mustang tied to his trailer, said he'd made a deal that settled his debts." "He never said where he got the horse?" Joe shook his head. "No, but I overheard him on the phone once talking to someone about how they'd gotten away clean, how no one had seen them near the wilder territory." He drained his glass. Frank was convinced that horse was going to be his salvation. Said a horse like that, with that bloodline, would be worth a fortune if he could break it and train it for breeding. But the Mustang wouldn't break. The more Frank tried, the more that horse resisted. Emma's mind was racing. If what Joe was saying was true, Frank had essentially stolen a protected wild horse from federal land, a serious crime. It would explain why he had kept Shadow hidden away on his property, why he had never registered the horse or sought proper veterinary care. "Thanks, Joe," she said, sliding off her stool and leaving her untouched beer behind. "I appreciate the information." Joe caught her arm. "Be careful, Doc. Frank's got a mean streak wider than the Rio Grande, and he's desperate these days. The bank's threatening to foreclose on his property. That horse was his last chance to get some real money." Emma nodded, a shiver running down her spine. She had known Frank was dangerous, but this new information painted an even darker picture. She needed to move quickly to secure Shadow's safety, and possibly her own. As she drove home through the dark countryside, her headlights cutting through the night, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled into something much bigger than a simple case of animal abuse. The pieces were beginning to fit together. A protected Mustang stolen from the wild, a desperate man with gambling debts, and a conspiracy that had remained hidden for years. Tomorrow, she would call the Bureau of Land Management and report what she had learned. With federal authorities involved, Shadow might finally have a chance at justice, and Frank Willard would have to answer for his crimes. Emma awoke before dawn, a sense of urgency propelling her from sleep. She reached for her phone on the nightstand and found 3 missed calls from Mark. Her stomach clenched as she quickly called him back. "Emma," Mark answered immediately, his voice tense. "Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours." "What's happened?" she asked, already climbing out of bed. "Someone came around the farm last night, asking questions about a black Mustang. One of my hands almost let something slip before I intervened. I don't know if it was Frank himself or someone working for him, but they're getting closer." Emma closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing heart. "We need to move Shadow today." "Already on it," Mark assured her. "My cousin's arranging transport. They'll be here by nightfall with a proper horse trailer and all the necessary paperwork to get him across state lines. But Emma, there's something else." "What is it?" "The person asking questions mentioned reward money, $5,000 for information leading to the recovery of the horse. Frank must be desperate if he's offering that kind of cash." Emma frowned. Frank was nearly bankrupt. Where would he get $5,000? Unless there was someone else involved, someone with deep pockets who had a vested interest in Shadow's return. "I need to make some calls," she told Mark. "Keep Shadow safe until I get there tonight. And Mark, thank you for everything." After hanging up, Emma dressed quickly and made coffee, her mind working overtime. She had planned to contact the Bureau of Land Management first thing, but with Frank's sudden offer of reward money, the situation had become even more volatile. She needed information, and she needed it fast. Her first call was to a former client who worked at the county records office. After some persuasion and the promise of free veterinary care for her 3 cats, the woman agreed to look up any recent financial transactions involving Frank Willard. Next, Emma called a friend who worked for the local newspaper. "Hey Diane, it's Emma. I need a favor. Can you check if there have been any stories about missing Mustangs from the Wilder herd in the last 3 years?" While waiting for callbacks, Emma drove to her clinic and busied herself with inventory, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. Around 10, Louisa arrived, bringing with her a copy of the local paper. "Thought you'd want to see this," she said, placing it on the counter. Emma's heart sank as she read the headline, "Local rancher offers reward for stolen horse." The article featured a grainy photo of Shadow and quoted Frank as saying the horse was a valuable breeding stallion that had been in his family for generations. The piece also mentioned that Sheriff Calhoun was investigating several leads. "It's all lies," Emma muttered, crumpling the paper. Louisa raised an eyebrow. "You know something about this, don't you?" Emma hesitated. Louisa had been her assistant for 5 years, and she trusted her implicitly. Still, the fewer people who knew the truth, the better. "It's complicated," she finally said, "and probably safer for you if you don't know the details." Louisa studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Okay. But if you need help, I'm here. Just say the word." The morning passed in a blur of appointments and phone calls. Emma's contact at the county records office called back around noon with intriguing news. Frank had received a wire transfer of $10,000 2 days ago from a company called Blackwell Enterprises. "Ever heard of them?" the woman asked. "No," Emma replied. "What do they do?" "That's the interesting part. I did some digging and they're a shell company. Impossible to trace who's really behind it." A shell company, and a sudden influx of cash. The mystery was deepening. Emma thanked her friend and hung up, only to have her phone ring again immediately. It was Diane from the newspaper. "I found something," Diane said without preamble. 3 years ago, the BLM reported that 5 Mustangs were stolen from the Wilder territory. One of them was a black stallion with distinctive white markings. The theft was never solved, but there were rumors that a professional rustling operation was behind it. Emma's pulse quickened. "Any names mentioned in connection with the theft?" "Nothing concrete, but one of the investigators mentioned a suspect named Victor Blackwell, a wealthy rancher from Wyoming who has a history of skirting regulations when it comes to wild horses. They couldn't prove anything, though." Blackwell. The same name as the shell company that had wired money to Frank. This couldn't be a coincidence. "Thanks, Diane. This helps a lot." After ending the call, Emma sat at her desk, connecting the dots. If Victor Blackwell was involved in stealing wild Mustangs, and if he had ties to Frank Willard, it would explain the sudden reward money and Frank's desperation to get Shadow back. But why now, after 3 years? Emma searched online for information about Victor Blackwell and found several articles about a controversial horse breeding operation in Wyoming. Blackwell specialized in rare bloodlines and had been fined multiple times for violations of animal welfare regulations. One recent article mentioned his acquisition of several mares from the Rafta J Ranch, known for their Spanish bloodlines similar to the Wilder herd. A theory began to form in Emma's mind. Blackwell was creating a breeding program focused on these rare Spanish bloodlines. Shadow, as a stallion from the Wilder herd, would be extremely valuable for such a program. Frank had probably stolen the Mustang on Blackwell's behalf, but had then tried to break and train the horse himself, hoping to increase its value. When that failed, he had likely kept the horse hidden away, afraid of being caught with stolen property, but unwilling to give up what he saw as his ticket out of financial ruin. Now, with Shadow missing, Blackwell must have gotten involved directly, providing the reward money and pressuring Frank to recover the horse. Emma's phone rang again. It was Maya. "Emma, there are men at Frank's place," the teenager said, her voice trembling. "They're not from around here, big guys in expensive clothes. They've been there since this morning, and they look angry. Stay inside and keep away from the windows," Emma instructed. "Don't let them see you watching them." There's something else, Maya added. I overheard them talking when they were near my property line. They mentioned Montana. They know, Emma. They know where you're planning to take Shadow. A cold dread settled in Emma's stomach. If Blackwell's men knew about the Montana sanctuary, Mark and Shadow were in immediate danger. She needed to warn them. Maya, I have to go. Lock your doors and don't talk to those men if they approach you. Call Sheriff Calhoun if they come onto your property. Emma rushed out of the clinic, telling Louisa to cancel the remaining appointments for the day. As she climbed into her truck, her phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Change of plans. Trailer arriving early. Be ready by 3 p.m. She texted back, be careful. They know about Montana. The drive to Mark's farm felt interminable. Emma took back roads, constantly checking her rearview mirror for signs of being followed. When she finally arrived, Mark was waiting by the gate, his expression grim. We need to move fast, he said as she pulled up. My cousin's contact arrived 20 minutes ago. They're loading Shadow now. Emma followed Mark to the back pasture, where a sleek, modern horse trailer was parked. A tall woman with silver-streaked black hair was gently coaxing Shadow up the ramp. This is Maria Redhawk, Mark said. She works with the sanctuary. Maria nodded in greeting, her focus primarily on Shadow. He's nervous, but he's doing well. I can see why you were so determined to save him. She ran a gentle hand over the Mustang's scarred flank. These wounds tell a story of incredible cruelty. Will he be safe at the sanctuary? Emma asked, watching as Shadow finally entered the trailer fully. Safer than anywhere else, Maria assured her. The sanctuary is on protected land, with security, and once we document his markings and confirm his lineage, he'll be registered as a protected Wilder Mustang. No one will be able to claim him then. Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Shadow would finally be free from abuse, surrounded by others of his kind, with room to run, and people who understood his worth beyond monetary value. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Maria secured the trailer and turned to Emma with serious eyes. Don't thank me yet. Getting him there won't be easy. We've got a long drive ahead, and if what you've told Mark is true, there are people looking for this horse who won't give up easily. I'm coming with you, Emma said firmly. It wasn't a question. Maria and Mark exchanged glances. It's risky, Mark warned. If you're caught crossing state lines with a horse that technically belongs to someone else. He doesn't belong to Frank, Emma insisted. He was stolen from the wild, and I'm not letting Shadow make this journey without me. He trusts me. After a moment of consideration, Maria nodded. All right, but we need to leave now, and we'll be taking the most discreet route possible. Pack light and be prepared for a long drive. Emma sent a quick text to Louisa, explaining that she would be gone for a few days on a family emergency. It wasn't entirely a lie. Shadow had become a kind of family to her, a connection to something wild and free that resonated with her own longing for liberation from the past. As they prepared to depart, Emma approached the trailer window to check on Shadow. The Mustang gazed back at her, his dark eyes somehow calmer than before, as if he sensed that his life was about to change for the better. We're going to get you somewhere safe, she promised him softly. Somewhere you can be free. Little did she know that the road to freedom would be fraught with more danger than she could have imagined, or that before their journey was complete, both she and Shadow would face a threat that would test the limits of their newfound bond. The convoy left Mark's farm as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rolling hills. Maria drove the truck pulling Shadow's trailer, with Emma following close behind in her own vehicle. They had decided it was safer to travel in separate cars. If one was stopped, the other might be able to continue the journey. Emma had packed hastily, throwing a few essentials into a duffel bag along with Shadow's medical records and the photos she had taken documenting his injuries. These would be crucial when they reached the sanctuary, providing evidence of the abuse he had suffered and establishing a timeline for his rehabilitation. They took back roads wherever possible, avoiding main highways and the scrutiny they might bring. Emma kept a vigilant eye on her rearview mirror, half expecting to see Frank's truck or unfamiliar vehicles in pursuit. The tension made her shoulders ache, and she rolled them periodically, trying to stay alert and focused. The sun was setting when Maria signaled for them to pull over at a small roadside diner. "We need to check on Shadow and get some food ourselves," she explained as they parked behind the building, away from the main road. "It's going to be a long night." Emma approached the trailer cautiously, speaking softly to Shadow before opening the small side door to peek in. The Mustang was standing quietly, his ears flicking toward the sound of her voice. He looked tired but calm, and Emma was relieved to see that the stress of travel hadn't agitated his injuries. "He's doing well," she told Maria. "Better than I expected, considering his history." Maria nodded, her dark eyes assessing. Mustangs are incredibly resilient. They've survived for generations in some of the harshest conditions imaginable. She offered Shadow a handful of hay from the supply they had brought. But resilience doesn't erase trauma. He has a long road ahead of him. They entered the diner together, choosing a booth near the window where they could keep an eye on the trailer. A tired-looking waitress took their order, coffee and sandwiches to go. Neither woman wanted to linger longer than necessary. "So you're a veterinarian," Maria said, studying Emma over the rim of her coffee cup. "What made you risk everything for this horse?" Emma stared into her own coffee, considering the question. "I've seen a lot of animal abuse cases over the years. You develop a thick skin, you have to, or you'd never be able to function. But there was something about Shadow." She trailed off, struggling to articulate the connection she had felt from the first moment she saw those intelligent eyes watching her. It was like he was asking for help, not just with his body, but with his spirit. Does that sound crazy? Maria shook her head, a small smile touching her lips. "Not to me. Indigenous cultures have long recognized the spiritual connection between humans and animals, particularly horses. My grandmother would say that Shadow chose you as much as you chose him." The waitress returned with their food packaged to go, and they paid quickly, eager to get back on the road. As they stepped outside, the night air had grown cooler, stars beginning to dot the vast expanse of sky above them. "We should reach the Wyoming border by midnight," Maria said as they walked back to their vehicles. "Once we cross, we'll be—" She stopped abruptly, her hand shooting out to grip Emma's arm. Emma followed her gaze to the parking lot entrance, where a black SUV had just pulled in, its headlights sweeping across the gravel. "Get in your truck," Maria said quietly. "Follow me, but keep your distance. If we get separated, head north on Highway 89. The sanctuary will send someone to meet you." Before Emma could respond, Maria was already moving toward her vehicle. Emma hurried to her own truck, her heart hammering against her ribs. The SUV had parked near the diner entrance, and two men in dark clothing were getting out. Emma couldn't see their faces clearly, but something about their purposeful movements sent a chill down her spine. She started her engine and followed Maria's truck as it pulled smoothly onto the road, the horse trailer swaying slightly behind it. In her rearview mirror, Emma saw one of the men turn toward the sound of their departing vehicles, then quickly speak to his companion. Moments later, they were rushing back to their SUV. "They're following us," Emma muttered, gripping the steering wheel tighter. She flashed her headlights twice to signal Maria, who immediately increased her speed. The road ahead wound through hilly terrain, with sharp curves and limited visibility. Emma struggled to keep Maria's trailer in sight while maintaining enough distance to react if necessary. The SUV was gaining on them, its powerful engine allowing it to close the gap with alarming speed. Emma's phone rang, and she answered via the truck's Bluetooth system. It was Maria. "There's a Forest Service road coming up on the right," she said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "It's unmarked, but I know these routes. When I signal with my brake lights, make the turn. We'll try to lose them in the backcountry." Emma acknowledged the plan, her mouth dry with fear. She had never been in a situation like this, being pursued by what she assumed were Blackwell's men, responsible for the safety of both a valuable horse and herself. The weight of her decisions pressed down on her, but there was no turning back now. When Maria's brake lights flashed 3 times in quick succession, Emma followed her onto the narrow dirt road that suddenly appeared between the trees. The SUV missed the turn, its momentum carrying it past the hidden entrance, but Emma knew their reprieve would be brief. The pursuers would realize their mistake and double back. The Forest Service road was rough, jolting Emma's truck and surely making Shadow's journey even more uncomfortable. She winced at every bump and pothole, imagining the Mustang struggling to keep his balance in the trailer ahead. They had been on the dirt road for perhaps 15 minutes when Maria pulled over in a small clearing, just large enough for both vehicles and the trailer. Emma parked beside her, cutting her engine immediately. "We need to check on Shadow," Maria explained, already heading for the trailer. "That was a rough stretch, and we need to make sure he's not injured." Emma joined her, and together they opened the trailer door. Shadow was visibly agitated, his coat damp with sweat, but he seemed physically unharmed. Emma spoke to him soothingly, running her hands over his legs and checking his bandages. "They'll find this road eventually," Maria said as they worked. "But there's a network of these service roads, and I know a route that will take us back to the highway further north. It'll add hours to our journey, but it might throw them off our trail." Emma nodded, giving Shadow a final reassuring pat before closing the trailer. "Let's do it. The longer we can avoid them, the better." They continued through the forest, navigating by the light of a quarter moon that filtered through the pine branches. The silence was profound, broken only by the crunch of tires on gravel and the occasional call of a night bird. Emma found herself holding her breath at every turn, expecting to see headlights behind them. After what seemed like an eternity of winding through the darkness, they emerged onto a paved road. Maria signaled for Emma to pull alongside her. "We're about 40 miles north of where we left the highway," she explained through her open window. "I think we've lost them for now, but we need to keep moving. The sanctuary has a network of safe houses for situations like this. There's one about 100 miles from here where we can rest for a few hours." "Do you do this often?" Emma asked, suddenly curious about the extent of the sanctuary's operations. Maria's expression was grim. "More often than you'd think. The wild horse controversy has created a dangerous landscape. There are powerful interests who see Mustangs as commodities to be exploited or obstacles to be removed. And then there are those of us who believe they deserve protection and freedom." She checked her watch. "We should reach the safe house by dawn. Try to stay alert until then." The remainder of the night passed in a blur of fatigue and hypervigilance. Emma followed Maria's truck through small towns and along empty stretches of highway, always watching for the black SUV or any other signs of pursuit. By the time the first light of dawn crept over the eastern horizon, her eyes were burning with exhaustion, and her back ached from hours of tense driving. The safe house turned out to be a small ranch tucked away in a valley, surrounded by aspen trees whose leaves trembled gold in the early morning light. A middle-aged couple greeted them at the gate, quickly ushering their vehicles into a large barn where they would be hidden from view. "This is Jacob and Ellen," Maria introduced them. "They've been helping the sanctuary for years." "You look dead on your feet," Ellen said kindly, leading Emma toward the main house. "Let's get you some breakfast and a place to rest." Emma wanted to check on Shadow first, ensuring he had water and something to eat. The Mustang seemed calmer in the quiet of the barn, though his eyes still held that wariness that broke Emma's heart. "You're safe here," she murmured, stroking his neck. "We all are, for a little while at least." Inside the house, Ellen served them a hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, and freshly baked bread. Emma hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food was in front of her. She ate quickly, asking between bites about the sanctuary and its work. "The place you're heading to isn't just a sanctuary in the traditional sense," Jacob explained. "It's more like a sovereign territory for Mustangs. Over 10,000 acres of protected land where they can live as they were meant to, wild and free, but safe from the threats of modern development and exploitation." "It sounds incredible," Emma said. "How did something like that come to exist?" Maria smiled, the first genuine smile Emma had seen from her. "It was founded by a coalition of tribal nations, conservation groups, and private donors who believed in preserving the Mustang not just as a symbol of American heritage, but as a living, breathing embodiment of freedom. The land is held in a trust that makes it virtually impossible for commercial interests to touch it. After the meal, Ellen showed Emma to a small but comfortable bedroom. "Get some sleep," she advised. "Maria says you'll be leaving again after dark." Emma nodded gratefully, suddenly aware that she had been awake for nearly 24 hours. She took a quick shower, the hot water washing away some of the tension in her muscles, then collapsed onto the bed. Despite her exhaustion, her mind continued to race, replaying the events of the past few days and wondering what lay ahead. Just before sleep claimed her, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Louisa. "Sheriff came by the clinic looking for you. Said it's urgent. What's going on, Emma?" Emma stared at the message, a new knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. The sanctuary was still hundreds of miles away, and now it seemed the law was officially looking for her. She texted back a brief, non-committal response about a family emergency, promising to explain everything when she returned. As she drifted off to sleep, Emma's last conscious thought was of Shadow and the promise she had made to him. Whatever happened, she would see this through. The Mustang deserved his freedom, and she was determined to make sure he found it. Emma woke to the sound of urgent voices. She blinked, disoriented for a moment in the unfamiliar bedroom. The digital clock on the nightstand read 4:37 p.m. She had slept for nearly 8 hours. Rubbing her eyes, she swung her legs over the side of the bed and listened. The voices were coming from somewhere downstairs, their tones serious and concerned. She dressed quickly and made her way down to the kitchen, where Maria, Jacob, and Ellen were gathered around a laptop. They looked up as she entered, their expressions grim. "What's going on?" Emma asked, immediately alert. Maria turned the laptop screen toward her. It showed a news article from the Dry Creek Gazette, with a headline that made Emma's stomach drop. "Veterinarian wanted for questioning in horse theft case." "They've issued a bolo for your truck," Jacob said quietly. "Be on the lookout. Every police department in 3 states has your description and license plate number." Emma sank into a chair, scanning the article with growing dismay. It quoted Sheriff Calhoun saying he had substantial evidence linking her to the disappearance of Frank Willard's horse. There was even a statement from Frank himself, portraying himself as a victim whose beloved family horse had been stolen by someone he had trusted to provide medical care. "This is bad," Ellen murmured, placing a supportive hand on Emma's shoulder. "They're making it sound like you're some kind of criminal." "I am, technically," Emma replied, the weight of reality settling over her. "I took Shadow without permission. The fact that Frank acquired him illegally doesn't change the fact that I broke the law, too." Maria closed the laptop with a decisive click. "We need to change our plans. You can't keep driving your truck. It's too easily identifiable now. And we need to get word to the sanctuary about what's happening." "I'll make the calls," Jacob offered, already reaching for his phone. "They need to send someone to meet us halfway." While Jacob stepped outside to make his calls, Ellen brought Emma a cup of strong coffee and a sandwich. "Eat," she instructed. "You'll need your strength." Emma tried to swallow past the lump in her throat. She had known there would be consequences for her actions, but facing them now made her question everything. Had she done the right thing? Was Shadow's freedom worth the destruction of her own? "I could lose my veterinary license over this," she said quietly. "Everything I've worked for, gone." Maria studied her with those penetrating dark eyes. "Do you regret saving him?" Emma thought of Shadow, of the scars that mapped his body, and the wary intelligence in his gaze. She thought of Frank's whip and his drunken rage, of the slaughterhouse that had awaited the Mustang if she hadn't intervened. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it. I just wish there had been another way." Maria nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. There rarely is another way when it comes to doing what's right. The system is designed to protect property, not beings. Shadow was considered property, not a living creature with his own intrinsic value. You challenged that system, and now the system is responding. Jacob returned, his face drawn with concern. The sanctuary is sending someone to meet us at a pre-arranged location in Idaho. They'll take Shadow the rest of the way." He turned to Emma. "They also said they have a contact at the Bureau of Land Management who might be able to help with your situation. If we can prove Shadow is a wilder Mustang taken illegally from protected land, it could change everything." Hope flickered in Emma's chest, but she tempered it with caution. "We'd need solid evidence. Right now it's just hearsay and suspicion." "Maybe not," Maria interjected. "The sanctuary has been documenting the wilder herd for decades. They have photographs of every horse, records of their markings and lineage. If Shadow truly is from that herd, there will be a match in their database." Ellen, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. "There's something else to consider. Frank said in that article that the horse has been in his family for generations. That's a provable lie. If you can demonstrate that he lied about that, it might cast doubt on his entire story." Emma considered this. "Joe Simmons told me Frank acquired Shadow about 3 years ago, around the same time those Mustangs went missing from the wilder territory. If we could get Joe to make a statement—" "One step at a time," Maria cautioned. "First, we need to get Shadow to safety. Then we can work on clearing your name." They spent the next few hours making preparations for the journey ahead. Jacob helped them create a makeshift disguise for the horse trailer, changing its appearance with temporary decals and a different license plate. "It's not perfect," he admitted, "but it might buy us some time if we're spotted." Ellen, meanwhile, packed them food and supplies for the road. She also gave Emma a wide-brimmed hat and sunglasses as a simple disguise. "Keep your head down if you pass through any towns or gas stations," she advised. As dusk approached, they gathered in the barn for a final check on Shadow. The Mustang seemed calmer after the day's rest, though he still watched them with those vigilant eyes that missed nothing. Emma checked his wounds, pleased to see that they were healing well despite the stress of travel. "We'll be taking back roads again," Maria explained as they prepared to leave. "It'll be slower, but safer. Jacob says there's a police checkpoint on the main highway." Emma nodded, her throat tight with anxiety. The reality of being a fugitive was setting in, and it was far less romantic than movies had led her to believe. She was scared, not just for herself, but for Shadow, and for the kind people who were risking their own safety to help them. They said their goodbyes to Jacob and Ellen, whose generosity had given them a much-needed respite. "Be careful out there," Ellen said, hugging Emma tightly. "And remember, you're not alone in this fight." As they pulled away from the ranch, the sun was setting behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley. Emma followed Maria's truck once again, this time in Jacob's old pickup. They had decided it was too risky for her to continue driving her own vehicle, which would remain hidden at the ranch until it was safe to retrieve it. The night closed around them, a blanket of stars overhead, and the rhythmic sound of tires on pavement, the only break in the silence. Emma found herself thinking of her clinic, of Louisa and her patients, of the life she had built in Dry Creek. Would she ever be able to return to it? Or had she sacrificed everything for a horse she had known for less than a week? Yet even as these doubts crept in, she remembered the feel of Shadow's coat beneath her fingers, the way he had leaned into her touch that first day. She thought of the Mustangs running free on the sanctuary land, wild and unbroken as they were meant to be. Whatever the cost, she knew in her heart that she had made the right choice. They had been driving for about 3 hours when Maria's brake lights flashed, and she pulled over to the side of the deserted country road. Emma stopped behind her, immediately alert for signs of trouble. Maria walked back to Emma's window. "We need to take a detour. I just got word that there's a roadblock ahead. Not for us specifically, but a routine DUI checkpoint. We can't risk it." Emma nodded, and they turned onto a narrow side road that wound through dense forest. The going was slow, the road barely more than a track in places, but they pressed on, guided by Maria's knowledge of the region and the GPS on her phone. Around midnight, they emerged from the forest onto a wider road that skirted a small lake, its surface reflecting the moonlight like a mirror. Maria signaled for them to stop at a viewing area overlooking the water. "We should check on Shadow," she said, "and I could use a break myself." They approached the trailer together, Emma speaking softly to the Mustang before opening the door. Shadow was standing quietly, though his ears pricked forward at the sound of Emma's voice. She ran her hands over him, checking for any signs of distress. "He's doing remarkably well," she told Maria. "Better than I would have expected given everything he's been through." Maria smiled, offering Shadow a handful of hay. "He knows he's safe with you. Horses are incredibly intuitive. They can sense when someone truly cares for them." They took a moment to stretch their legs and drink some water from the supplies Ellen had packed. The night was peaceful, the air cool and scented with pine. In another context, it might have been a pleasant camping trip rather than a desperate flight from the law. "How much further to the rendezvous point?" Emma asked as they prepared to continue. "About 4 hours if we don't run into any more complications," Maria replied. "We're meeting them at dawn at a place called Eagle Rock. It's remote, no nearby towns or highways." They were just about to return to their vehicles when the silence was shattered by the distant sound of an engine. Powerful, fast approaching. Maria's head snapped up, her expression instantly alert. "Get in the truck," she ordered. "Now." Emma didn't hesitate, rushing to the driver's side door. As she climbed in, she caught sight of headlights in her rearview mirror, coming around the bend in the road they had just traveled. "It's them," Maria said through the open window of her own truck. "Blackwell's men. They must have picked up our trail somehow." Emma's heart pounded as she started the engine. "What do we do?" "We split up," Maria decided quickly. "I'll take Shadow on a different route. You head straight for Eagle Rock. If they follow you instead of me, it'll buy us time to get Shadow to safety." "But," Emma began to protest. "There's no time to argue," Maria cut her off. "You have the coordinates in your GPS. Go now and don't stop for anything." Before Emma could respond, Maria was already in her truck, starting the engine. She pulled away with the trailer, taking a fork in the road that led further around the lake. Emma hesitated for just a second, then turned in the opposite direction, accelerating as quickly as the old pickup would allow. In her rearview mirror, she saw the black SUV appear at the viewing area, pausing as its occupants seemingly deliberated which vehicle to follow. Then, to her horror, it turned in her direction, its powerful engine roaring as it gave chase. Emma gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white with tension. She had become the decoy, leading Blackwell's men away from Shadow and Maria. It was what they had planned, but the reality of being pursued through the dark countryside sent adrenaline coursing through her veins. The road ahead twisted and turned, following the contours of the hills. Emma pushed the pickup as fast as she dared, knowing that one mistake, one missed curve, could end disastrously. The SUV gained on her, its headlights filling her mirrors, so bright they nearly blinded her. She rounded a bend and saw Salvation, a narrow dirt road branching off to the right. Acting on instinct, Emma cut the wheel sharply, barely making the turn. The pickup's tires skidded on the loose gravel, and for a heart-stopping moment, she thought she would lose control. But then the vehicle steadied, and she plunged into the darkness of the forest road, cutting her headlights as soon as she was out of sight of the main route. The SUV shot past the turnoff, its momentum carrying it forward before the driver could react. Emma held her breath, driving slowly and carefully in the dark, relying on the faint moonlight filtering through the trees to guide her. After several minutes, when she was certain she had not been followed, she pulled over and killed the engine, listening intently for any sound of pursuit. There was only silence, broken occasionally by the hoot of an owl or the rustle of wind through the pines. Emma's hands were shaking as she reached for her phone to text Maria. "Lost them for now. Continuing to Eagle Rock." The reply came almost immediately. "Good. Shadow safe. See you at dawn." Emma leaned back in the seat, relief washing over her in a wave that left her feeling weak and drained. They had bought themselves some time, but the danger was far from over. Blackwell's men were still out there, searching, and now law enforcement was looking for her as well. As she started the engine again and continued along the forest road, hoping it would eventually reconnect with her route to Eagle Rock, Emma found herself thinking of David. What would he have done in this situation? He had always been the brave one, the one who faced challenges head-on with unwavering determination. She could almost hear his voice. "Keep going, Em. You're doing the right thing. Don't give up now." With renewed resolve, she pressed on through the night, guided by the stars above, and the conviction that she was fighting for something that mattered, the freedom of a magnificent creature who had endured too much suffering at human hands. The forest road seemed endless, winding through dense trees with only occasional glimpses of the star-filled sky above. Emma drove cautiously, hyper-aware of every sound and shadow. The old pickup's headlights carved a narrow path through the darkness, illuminating fallen branches and occasional wildlife that froze momentarily before darting away. After what felt like hours, the trees began to thin, and the road widened slightly. Emma consulted the GPS on her phone, relieved to see that despite the detour, she was still heading in the right direction. Eagle Rock was approximately 2 hours away if she maintained her current pace. She allowed herself to think about Shadow, hoping he was handling the journey well. The Mustang had already endured so much. This final leg of the trip would hopefully lead him to the freedom he deserved. Emma tried not to dwell on her own uncertain future. The possibility of arrest, the loss of her veterinary license, the end of the life she had built in Dry Creek. One step at a time, she told herself. Get Shadow to safety first. The road eventually merged with a larger county highway, and Emma increased her speed, keeping a vigilant eye out for other vehicles. It was nearly 3 a.m., and traffic was practically non-existent in this remote area. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, pursued. Her phone rang, startling her. It was Mark. "Emma, where are you?" His voice was tight with urgency. "About 2 hours from Eagle Rock. Why? What's happened?" "The sheriff contacted me. They're executing a search warrant on my property tomorrow morning. Someone must have tipped them off that Shadow was there." Emma's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Did they find anything?" "No, I've been careful. But Emma, they're building a case against you. The sheriff mentioned potential charges, grand theft, crossing state lines with stolen property. This is serious." She swallowed hard, pushing down the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. "I know. But we're close now. Once Shadow is at the sanctuary, we can focus on proving Frank acquired him illegally." Mark was silent for a moment. "There's something else. I did some digging into Blackwell Enterprises. Victor Blackwell isn't just some wealthy rancher with shady business practices. He has connections to politicians, judges, people with real power. If he's involved in this, you're up against more than just Frank Willard." The information settled like a weight in Emma's stomach. She had suspected as much from the resources Blackwell seemed to have at his disposal, but hearing it confirmed made the danger feel more immediate, more personal. "What should I do?" she asked, hating how small her voice sounded. "Keep going," Mark said firmly. "Get Shadow to the sanctuary. The people there have resources too, legal teams, media connections. Once the horse is safe, we can work on protecting you." After ending the call, Emma drove in silence, her mind racing. The eastern horizon was beginning to lighten almost imperceptibly, the deepest black of night softening to a dark blue. Dawn was approaching, and with it, the rendezvous at Eagle Rock. She checked her GPS again, noting that she needed to turn onto an unpaved road in about 10 miles. That would lead her to the meeting point, where the sanctuary representatives would be waiting to take Shadow the rest of the way. As she drove, Emma found herself thinking about the first time she had seen the Mustang, standing in that corner of Frank's corral, his head hanging low but his eyes still burning with that unbroken spirit. What was it about this particular horse that had moved her to such drastic action? She had treated many abused animals over the years, advocated for their welfare within the confines of the law. What made Shadow different? Perhaps it was the recognition she had seen in those dark eyes, a kindred spirit who had endured loss and pain but refused to surrender to it. Or maybe it was simply that this time she had been pushed too far, had seen too much cruelty disguised as ownership rights, too many laws that protected property instead of living beings. Emma was so lost in thought that she almost missed her turn. She braked suddenly, the pickup skidding slightly on the loose gravel as she made the sharp right onto the unpaved road. The terrain became rougher, the vehicle bouncing over ruts and rocks. According to the GPS, Eagle Rock was just 5 miles ahead. The first rays of sunlight were breaking over the distant mountains when Emma finally spotted the distinctive formation that gave Eagle Rock its name, a towering outcrop of stone that, from certain angles, resembled a bird of prey with outstretched wings. At the base of the rock was a small clearing, and Emma's heart leapt when she saw Maria's truck and the horse trailer already parked there. As she pulled in beside them, Maria emerged from her vehicle, looking tired but relieved. "You made it. I was starting to worry." "Had to take some detours," Emma explained, climbing out of the pickup with legs stiff from hours of driving. "How's Shadow?" "See for yourself." Together they approached the trailer. Shadow was standing quietly, his ears pricked forward with interest as they opened the door. Emma reached out to stroke his neck, and the Mustang lowered his head slightly, leaning into her touch in a gesture that brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "He's come so far in such a short time," Maria observed. "Most horses with his history of abuse would be completely shut down or aggressive, but he's choosing to trust again. That's rare." Emma blinked back tears, continuing to stroke the Mustang's sleek neck. "When will the sanctuary people arrive?" Maria checked her watch. "Any minute now. They're bringing a specialized trailer for the rest of the journey, more comfortable for Shadow, and less conspicuous." As if on cue, the sound of an approaching vehicle reached them. A white pickup truck pulling a spacious, modern horse trailer came into view, dust billowing behind it as it navigated the rough road. The truck parked, and 2 people emerged, a tall, broad-shouldered man with gray-streaked hair and a younger woman with a practical ponytail and the confident movements of someone who worked with horses daily. "Maria," the man greeted her with a nod before turning to Emma. "And you must be Dr. Sullivan. I'm Ben Harper, head of security for the sanctuary. This is Alicia Gonzalez, our head veterinarian." Emma shook their hands, noting the firm grip and direct gaze of both individuals. These were people who meant business, who were committed to their cause. "Thank you for coming," she said, "and for everything you're doing to help Shadow." Alicia approached the trailer, speaking softly to Shadow before beginning a quick examination. "He's in remarkably good condition considering what he's been through," she commented, running professional hands over the Mustang's body. "You've taken good care of him, Dr. Sullivan." "Call me Emma," she replied. "And I did what I could, but he needs proper rehabilitation. The psychological scars are probably deeper than the physical ones." Ben was checking his phone, his expression growing serious. "We need to move quickly. I just got word that there's increased police activity in the area. They may be setting up roadblocks." Together, they began the process of transferring Shadow to the new trailer. The Mustang was hesitant at first, eyeing the unfamiliar space with suspicion. Emma stood at his head, speaking to him in the gentle voice that had become a source of comfort over the past few days. "It's okay," she murmured. "These people are going to take you somewhere safe, somewhere you can run free." Whether it was her voice or some intuitive understanding of his own, Shadow finally stepped forward, allowing himself to be led into the new trailer. Alicia secured him carefully, ensuring he had water and hay for the journey ahead. "What happens now?" Emma asked as they closed the trailer door. "We take Shadow to the sanctuary," Ben explained. "We have a special route that avoids main roads and checkpoints. It'll take longer, but it's safer." He hesitated, exchanging a glance with Maria. "As for you, Dr. Sullivan, Emma, you have a decision to make." "What kind of decision?" "You can come with us to the sanctuary," Ben said. "We can offer you protection, at least temporarily. Or," he paused, "Maria tells me you have evidence that Frank Willard acquired Shadow illegally, that he's actually a wilder Mustang taken from protected land." Emma nodded. "I have testimony from someone who worked for Frank, and the timing matches the reported theft of Mustangs from the wilder territory 3 years ago. But it's all circumstantial. I need concrete proof." Which is why option 2 might be better, Alicia interjected. Our contact at the Bureau of Land Management is willing to meet with you. He has access to the genetic database for the Wilder herd. If Shadow is truly from that bloodline, a DNA comparison would prove it conclusively. That would mean going back, Emma realized, the implications settling heavily in her stomach. Facing possible arrest while we try to build a case. Ben nodded solemnly. It's a risk, but if you succeed, you could not only clear your own name, but potentially bring down a larger operation stealing wild horses. According to our sources, Victor Blackwell has been involved in this kind of activity for years, but no one has been able to gather enough evidence to stop him. Emma walked a few steps away, needing space to think. The sun was now fully visible above the mountains, bathing the landscape in golden light. In the new trailer, Shadow was calmly eating hay, seeming to understand that he was among friends. Part of her wanted to go with the Mustang, to see him safely to the sanctuary, to witness the moment when he would join other horses in wide-open spaces where no whip or cruel hand would ever touch him again. But another part of her knew that running wasn't the answer. If she truly wanted to make a difference, not just for Shadow but for other horses like him, she needed to stand and fight. She turned back to the group. I'll meet with the BLM contact. If there's a chance to prove Shadow was stolen from protected land, I have to take it. Maria stepped forward, placing a hand on Emma's shoulder. You don't have to do this alone. I'll go with you. Emma shook her head. No, Shadow needs you. Make sure he gets to the sanctuary safely. I can handle this part. Ben approached, offering a small device that looked like a flash drive. This contains encrypted communications software. Use it to contact us securely. Our legal team is standing by to assist you the moment you have concrete evidence. Alicia added, I've collected hair samples from Shadow for DNA comparison. Your BLM contact will know what to do with them. They spent the next half hour discussing details, the name and location of the BLM contact, the safest routes for both parties to travel, contingency plans if things went wrong. As they talked, Emma found herself repeatedly glancing at Shadow, memorizing the lines of his face, the intelligent gleam in his eye, the proud set of his head that even years of abuse hadn't been able to diminish. Finally, it was time to say goodbye. Emma approached the trailer one last time, reaching through the window to stroke Shadow's nose. The Mustang nickered softly, nudging her hand in a gesture that seemed almost like gratitude. I'll see you again, she promised, her voice thick with emotion. When all this is over, I'll come visit you at the sanctuary. As the white pickup and trailer pulled away, carrying Shadow to his new life, Emma felt a strange mixture of loss and determination. The Mustang had come into her life so suddenly, had upended everything she thought she knew about herself and what she was capable of. Now, watching him leave, she realized that their journey together wasn't ending. It was merely entering a new phase. Maria approached, her expression sympathetic. It's hard, isn't it? Letting go. Emma nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then, squaring her shoulders, she said, We should get moving. I have a meeting to prepare for. As they parted ways, Maria continuing with the sanctuary's mission, Emma turning back toward the storm she had left behind. The sun climbed higher in the sky, promising a new day and, perhaps, a chance for justice. Little did Emma know that her journey was about to take yet another unexpected turn, one that would bring her face to face with the man responsible for Shadow's suffering and force her to confront dangers she had never anticipated. Emma drove with a singular focus, following the directions Ben had given her to meet the Bureau of Land Management contact. The rendezvous point was a small field office in a town called Pinewood, about 3 hours from Eagle Rock. According to Ben, the contact, a man named Thomas Whelan, was a senior wildlife biologist who had been documenting the Wilder herd for over a decade. The landscape gradually changed as she headed east, the rugged mountains giving way to rolling hills dotted with pine forests. Emma kept the radio on, scanning for news updates. Around mid-morning, she heard what she had been dreading, a brief report about a local veterinarian wanted for questioning in connection with the theft of a valuable horse. Her name wasn't mentioned, but it was only a matter of time. She stopped at a small gas station to refuel and buy a prepaid phone. Her own phone was becoming too risky to use, as law enforcement could potentially track it. While paying for her purchases, she caught sight of a newspaper on the counter. The front page featured an article about wild horse controversies in the West, with a quote from none other than Victor Blackwell, described as a rancher and businessman advocating for balanced land use policies. Emma bought the paper and read the article in the truck. Blackwell was portrayed as a reasonable voice in the debate, someone who respected both conservation efforts and the economic needs of ranching communities. There was no mention of his alleged involvement in Mustang thefts or illegal breeding operations. The contrast between this public image and what she had learned about him was stark. Back on the road, Emma rehearsed what she would say to Thomas Whelan. She needed to convince him that Shadow was indeed a Wilder Mustang, and that Frank had acquired him illegally. The DNA evidence would be crucial, but she also needed to build a compelling case about the larger operation she suspected was at work. She arrived in Pinewood shortly after noon. It was a small town with a single main street lined with modest buildings, a post office, a diner, a hardware store, and at the end of the street, the field office of the Bureau of Land Management. Emma parked across the street, watching the building for a few minutes to ensure there was nothing suspicious. According to Ben, Whelan was expecting her around 1 p.m. Taking a deep breath, Emma gathered the folder containing Shadow's medical records, the photos documenting his injuries, and the hair samples Alicia had collected for DNA testing. She crossed the street and entered the field office, a simple space with a reception desk and a few chairs in the waiting area. The receptionist, a young woman with glasses and a friendly smile, looked up as Emma approached. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Thomas Whelan," Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I believe he's expecting me." The woman checked a schedule on her computer. "Dr. Sullivan, yes, he mentioned you would be stopping by. I'll let him know you're here." Emma took a seat in the waiting area, her heart pounding. There was no turning back now. She was placing her trust in a stranger, betting her future on the integrity of a government official she had never met. A few minutes later, a door opened, and a man in his 50s emerged. Thomas Whelan had the weathered look of someone who spent most of his time outdoors, tanned skin, crow's feet around his eyes, and a firm handshake that spoke of practical work rather than desk duty. "Dr. Sullivan," he greeted her, his voice low and measured. "Please, come back to my office." Emma followed him through the door and down a short hallway to a modest office filled with maps, wildlife photographs, and stacks of reports. A large map of the Wilder territory dominated one wall, with colored pins marking various locations. Whelan closed the door behind them and gestured for Emma to take a seat. "I understand from our mutual contacts that you have information about a Wilder Mustang that was illegally removed from protected land." Emma nodded, opening her folder. "His name is Shadow. He was in the possession of a rancher named Frank Willard until recently. I have reason to believe he was stolen from the Wilder herd approximately 3 years ago." She laid out the evidence, Joe Simmons's testimony about when Frank acquired the horse, the timing that coincided with the reported theft, the distinctive markings that Maria had identified as characteristic of the Wilder bloodline. As she spoke, Whelan listened intently, occasionally making notes, but not interrupting. When she mentioned Victor Blackwell's potential involvement, however, his expression changed subtly, a tightening around the eyes, a slight tension in his jaw. "That's a serious allegation, Dr. Sullivan," he said carefully. "Victor Blackwell is a powerful man in this region, with connections in Washington. What makes you think he's involved?" Emma explained about the wire transfer from Blackwell Enterprises to Frank, the timing of the reward offer, and the men who had pursued them during their journey. "It's too coordinated to be just Frank acting alone. Someone with resources is backing him." Whelan leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "I've had suspicions about Blackwell for years. There have been several incidents of Mustangs disappearing from protected areas, always with the same pattern: no witnesses, professional execution, targeted horses with specific genetic traits. but we've never been able to gather enough evidence to launch a formal investigation. He reached for the envelope containing Shadow's hair samples. This could change everything. If we can establish through DNA that this horse is from the Wilder herd, and if we can connect Blackwell to the theft, it would be a major breakthrough. How long will the DNA testing take? Emma asked. Normally weeks, but I have a contact at the university lab who can expedite it. We might have preliminary results in a day or two. Whelan studied her face. In the meantime, Dr. Sullivan, you need to be careful. You're taking on powerful interests, and from what I understand, you're already in legal jeopardy for removing the horse from Willard's property. Emma nodded grimly. I'm aware of the risks, but I couldn't leave Shadow there to suffer. And now that I've learned about the larger operation at work, I can't walk away from this. Whelan's expression softened slightly. I respect your courage. Too many people look the other way when confronted with wrongdoing, especially when standing up means personal sacrifice. He hesitated, then added, I should tell you that I've been building a case against Blackwell for nearly 2 years. I have a file, documentation of suspicious activities, patterns of behavior, financial transactions that don't add up. Your evidence about Shadow could be the missing piece. Hope surged in Emma's chest. If Whelan had already been investigating Blackwell, perhaps her situation wasn't as desperate as she had feared. Does this mean the BLM will officially get involved? Not yet, Whelan cautioned. We need more concrete evidence before I can request a formal investigation. But if the DNA test confirms what you suspect, and if we can establish a clear connection between Blackwell, Willard, and the theft of protected Mustangs, then yes, the full resources of the Bureau could be brought to bear. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. The receptionist poked her head in, her expression apologetic. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Whelan, but there's a Sheriff Calhoun on the phone for you. Says it's urgent. Emma froze, her blood turning to ice. How had Calhoun tracked her here? Whelan's face revealed nothing as he nodded to the receptionist. Tell him I'll call him back in 15 minutes. I'm in the middle of an important meeting. When the door closed again, Whelan turned to Emma with newfound urgency. You need to leave, now. There's a back exit through the storage room. He scribbled an address on a piece of paper. Go to this location. It's a cabin owned by a friend of mine. You'll be safe there while I process these samples and make some inquiries. Emma took the paper with trembling fingers. Do you think Calhoun knows I'm here? I don't know, but we can't take that chance. The sheriff's office and the BLM don't typically communicate about routine matters. The fact that he's calling me directly suggests he has information about your whereabouts. Whelan stood, gathering the evidence Emma had provided. I'll keep this safe and get it to the lab today. Use this number to contact me securely. He handed her a business card with a handwritten number on the back. Whelan led her through a cluttered storage room to a metal door that opened onto an alley behind the building. The cabin is about 30 miles north of here, in the foothills. It's isolated, but it has electricity and basic supplies. Stay there until you hear from me. Emma paused at the door. Thank you for believing me, for helping Shadow. Whelan's weathered face creased in a brief smile. Wild horses have been my life's work, Dr. Sullivan. What you've done, risking everything to save one of them, that's something I understand all too well. With a final nod of gratitude, Emma slipped out the door and hurried to the truck. She started the engine and pulled away from the BLM office, taking care not to speed or draw attention. In her rearview mirror, she caught a glimpse of a sheriff's department vehicle turning onto the main street, and her heart skipped a beat. She turned at the next corner, putting distance between herself and the potential threat. The directions to the cabin took her along increasingly remote roads, winding through pine forests and across streams swollen with spring runoff. The elevation increased, the air growing cooler as she climbed into the foothills. After nearly an hour of driving, she turned onto a narrow dirt track barely wide enough for the truck, branches occasionally scraping against the windows. The cabin, when she finally reached it, was more rustic than she had expected. A single-room structure built of logs, with a small porch facing a stunning view of the valley below. Emma parked behind the cabin, where the truck would be hidden from the road, and approached cautiously. The door was locked, but the key was exactly where Whelan had said it would be, under a flower pot containing a hardy mountain plant. Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable. A wood stove for heat, a small kitchenette, a bed in one corner, and a sitting area with a worn sofa and a bookshelf filled with volumes on wildlife and conservation. Emma sank onto the sofa, the events of the past few days finally catching up with her. She was a fugitive, hiding in a remote cabin while a federal agency investigated her claims. Her professional life hung in the balance, her reputation in tatters, and yet, strangely, she felt more purposeful than she had in years. For the first time since David's death, she was fighting for something bigger than herself, something that mattered deeply. She thought of Shadow, wondering if he had reached the sanctuary yet, if he was adjusting to his new surroundings. Had he met other horses? Was he beginning to understand that he was safe, that no one would hurt him again? The image of the Mustang running free across open grassland brought tears to her eyes. Tears of exhaustion, relief, and lingering anxiety about what was still to come. Emma checked her phone one last time before turning it off completely. There were several missed calls from Louisa and one from Mark. A text from Maria simply read, "He's home, safe and settling in. Stay strong." Those few words brought a measure of peace. Whatever happened next, Shadow was where he belonged. Emma had kept her promise to him. Now she needed to focus on clearing her own name and bringing those responsible for his suffering to justice. She explored the cabin, finding a well-stocked pantry with canned goods and dry staples. There was also a small collection of maps of the surrounding area, which she studied carefully in case she needed to make a quick escape. The cabin's location was strategic, multiple routes in and out, good visibility of the approach road, and dense forest, providing cover if necessary. As the sun began to set, Emma built a small fire in the wood stove to ward off the evening chill. The warmth and the crackling of the flames brought a drowsy comfort, and she realized she hadn't slept properly in days. She made a simple meal from the supplies in the pantry, then settled on the sofa with a blanket, intending to rest just for a moment. She was awakened by a sound, faint but distinct, the crunch of tires on gravel. Emma sat up, instantly alert, her heart racing. It was fully dark outside, the only light coming from the dying embers in the wood stove. She moved silently to the window, peering cautiously around the edge of the curtain. Headlights approached slowly along the access road, then stopped about 100 yards from the cabin. The lights went out, but the engine remained running. Emma reached for her phone, then remembered she had turned it off for safety. She was alone, with no way to call for help. Quickly, she gathered her essentials: wallet, keys, the secure communications device Ben had given her. She slipped on her jacket and boots, preparing to flee into the forest if necessary. But first, she needed to know who was out there. Friend or foe? Whelan returning with news, or someone with more sinister intentions? Emma extinguished the last of the fire and moved to the back door, which offered the best escape route. Through a small window, she could see the vehicle more clearly now. Not a police car or the black SUV that had pursued them earlier, but a pickup truck similar to many in the region. A single figure emerged, moving cautiously toward the cabin. As the person drew closer, the moonlight revealed a familiar silhouette that made Emma's breath catch in her throat. It wasn't Whelan or law enforcement or Blackwell's men. It was Frank Willard, and in his hand was something that glinted in the moonlight, the barrel of a rifle. Emma's mind raced. How had Frank found her? Was he alone, or were others waiting in the truck? And most importantly, what was she going to do now, trapped in an isolated cabin with an armed, vengeful man approaching? The decision was made for her when Frank's voice cut through the stillness of the night. "I know you're in there, Sullivan. Come out and face me, or I'm coming in after you." Emma's mind raced, adrenaline sharpening her senses. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to disappear into the darkness of the forest surrounding the cabin. But something held her back. The realization that running would only postpone the inevitable. Frank had found her once. He could find her again. And next time, she might not have the advantage of walls between them. "I'm counting to 10, Sullivan." Frank's voice was slurred, suggesting he had been drinking. "Then I'm shooting the lock off this door." Emma scanned the cabin desperately for anything she could use to defend herself. Her eyes landed on a heavy iron poker by the wood stove. She grabbed it, the weight solid and reassuring in her hand, then positioned herself to the side of the front door, out of the direct line of fire if Frank followed through on his threat. 1, 2. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Frank was armed, but he was also drunk and likely not thinking clearly. Maybe she could reason with him, stall until help arrived, if help was coming at all. 3, 4. "Frank," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "I don't have your horse. He's gone, far from here." The counting stopped. "You're lying. You stole him and I want him back." "Why?" Emma challenged, a sudden flash of insight guiding her words. "So you can return him to Blackwell. Is that what this is about? He's pressuring you to deliver, isn't he?" A startled silence followed her accusation. When Frank spoke again, his voice had lost some of its bluster. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know more than you think," Emma replied, pressing her advantage. "I know Shadow is a Wilder Mustang, stolen from protected federal land. I know Blackwell paid you to acquire him illegally, and I know the Bureau of Land Management is investigating both of you right now." This last part was stretching the truth, but Emma needed to shake Frank's confidence to make him second-guess his actions. "That's bull," Frank spat, but there was a new note of uncertainty in his voice. "You can't prove any of that." "Actually, I can. Shadow's DNA is being tested as we speak, matching him to the Wilder herd. And I have witness testimony about when and how you acquired him." Emma paused, then added, "The FBI doesn't look kindly on people who steal protected animals, Frank, or on those who threaten federal witnesses with firearms." She heard shuffling outside, the sound of boots on the porch steps. "Open this door," Frank demanded, his voice closer now. "We need to talk." "Put the rifle down first," Emma countered. "I'm not opening anything while you're armed." More silence, then the sound of something heavy being set on the wooden porch. "There, unarmed. Now open up before I change my mind." Emma hesitated, her grip tightening on the poker. Frank could be lying, or he could have another weapon, but she couldn't stay barricaded in the cabin indefinitely. Taking a deep breath, she moved to the door, poker held ready, and turned the lock. The door swung open to reveal Frank Willard, swaying slightly on his feet. His face was haggard, his eyes bloodshot, the smell of whiskey emanating from him in waves. Without the rifle, he seemed smaller somehow, less threatening, just a desperate man at the end of his rope. "Where is he?" Frank demanded, his gaze darting past Emma to scan the cabin interior. "I told you he's gone. Somewhere you'll never find him." Emma kept the poker visible, a reminder that she was prepared to defend herself. "How did you find me, Frank?" A bitter smile twisted his lips. "Followed that BLM fellow. Figured if anyone knew where you'd gone, it would be him. Saw you leaving out the back door but couldn't catch up in time. So I waited, watched which way he went after work. Led me straight here." Emma's heart sank. If Frank had followed Whelan, others might have as well. The cabin might not be as safe as she had thought. "What do you want?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "I want my horse back," Frank growled. "Blackwell's breathing down my neck, threatening to expose me if I don't deliver. Do you have any idea what he'll do to me if I don't get that horse back?" "And do you have any idea what you did to Shadow?" Emma retorted, anger flaring. "I saw the scars, Frank. I treated the wounds you inflicted. You nearly destroyed him with your cruelty." Frank's expression darkened. "That animal was stubborn. Wouldn't break, no matter what I did. And I needed him to cooperate. Needed him to be worth something." "Worth something to who? Blackwell? Is that who you answer to?" Frank's eyes narrowed. "You don't understand the situation. Blackwell owns half this county one way or another. People who cross him tend to have accidents. Bad ones. Is that why you're here? To have an accident?" Emma tightened her grip on the poker. Frank shook his head, looking suddenly tired. I'm here because I need that horse back. My life depends on it. Shadow is safe, Emma said firmly. He's at a sanctuary where he belongs, with other Mustangs, free from abuse, free from people like you who see him as nothing but a commodity to be broken and sold. You don't get it, do you? Frank's voice rose. Blackwell doesn't want just any horse. That Mustang has specific bloodlines he needs for his breeding program. He's been working for years to create the perfect combination of strength, intelligence, and endurance. Shadow was the missing piece. Emma absorbed this information, the pieces clicking into place. So it's not just about stealing wild horses for profit. It's about creating a specialized bloodline that he controls exclusively. That Mustang is worth more than you can imagine, Frank confirmed. Blackwell has clients worldwide waiting for horses with those genetics, military contracts, elite equestrian programs, you name it. And you're just a pawn in his game, Emma observed, studying Frank's defeated posture. He uses people like you to do his dirty work, to take the risks, while he keeps his hands clean. Frank didn't deny it. I needed the money. The drought had nearly bankrupted me. Blackwell offered a way out. His bloodshot eyes met hers with unexpected clarity. I'm not asking you to understand. I'm telling you to give me the horse back, or we're both dead. Emma's mind worked quickly, seeing an opportunity in Frank's desperation. I can't give you Shadow, but I might be able to offer you something better. A way out. Frank snorted. There is no way out with Blackwell. There is if you help bring him down. Emma took a calculated risk, lowering the poker slightly. The Bureau of Land Management is building a case against him. Your testimony could be the key evidence they need. Tell them everything. How Blackwell approached you, how the operation works, who else is involved. In exchange, you could get immunity. Frank stared at her, disbelief warring with a flicker of hope in his bleary eyes. You think the government can protect me from a man like Blackwell? I think it's your only chance, Emma replied honestly. Keep working for him, and eventually, you'll outlive your usefulness, or make a mistake he can't forgive. But help the authorities, and you might actually have a future. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft hooting of an owl in the nearby forest. Emma could almost see the calculations running through Frank's mind, weighing loyalties against survival instincts. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough with emotion. I never meant for it to go this far. When Blackwell first approached me, it seemed simple. Just acquire a specific horse, break it, and deliver it to him. But Shadow wouldn't break. 3 years I tried, and nothing worked. Then Blackwell started getting impatient, threatening me. And then you showed up, and everything went to hell. It's not too late to make it right, Emma urged. Help us stop Blackwell before he steals more horses, before he exploits more people like you. Frank ran a hand over his face, the fight seeming to drain out of him. If I do this, I'm a dead man. If you don't, you're still a dead man, just on a longer timeline, Emma countered. At least this way, you'd be doing something good. Maybe the only good thing left in your power to do. Another long silence. Then Frank straightened, a decision visibly forming. I need a drink. Then we'll talk about what I know. Emma hesitated, then nodded toward the cabin. There might be something inside, but I'm keeping this. She raised the poker slightly. She allowed Frank to enter first, maintaining a safe distance as he slumped onto the sofa. From a cabinet in the kitchenette, she retrieved a bottle of whiskey, presumably left by Whelan's friend for visitors, and poured a modest amount into a mug. She handed it to Frank, who downed it in a single swallow. Start from the beginning, Emma instructed, sitting across from him, the poker still within reach. How did you get involved with Blackwell? Frank stared into the empty mug, his voice low as he began to speak. It was after the 3rd year of the drought. Bank was threatening foreclosure on my ranch. I was drinking at a bar in Westfield when a man approached me, said his employer had heard about my financial troubles and might have a proposition for me. As Frank talked, the full scope of Blackwell's operation emerged. The wealthy rancher had been systematically targeting specific Mustangs from protected herds for years, using local ranchers like Frank as his agents. The horses were chosen for their genetic traits: speed, endurance, intelligence, and adaptability, traits that Blackwell was combining in his secretive breeding program. He has a compound in Wyoming, Frank explained. Thousands of acres, completely private. That's where he does the breeding. The foals with the right characteristics are kept and trained. The others? He trailed off, then shrugged. I never asked. And Shadow was special because of his Wilder bloodline? Emma prompted. Frank nodded. Blackwell had been trying to get a stallion from that herd for years. Said they had genetic markers not found in other Mustang populations, something about Spanish ancestry that never got diluted. When I finally managed to get Shadow, Blackwell was ecstatic. Paid me more money than I'd seen in my life. But the deal was I had to break the horse first, make him manageable for breeding. Which you couldn't do, Emma observed. A bitter laugh escaped Frank. That horse has a spirit like nothing I've ever seen. The more I tried to break him, the more he resisted. After a year, Blackwell started getting impatient. After 2, he was threatening. After 3, he shook his head. Let's just say I was running out of time when you showed up. And now? Now I'm as good as dead unless I deliver that Mustang. Frank looked up, his eyes haunted. Or unless your plan works, and the authorities actually manage to take Blackwell down before he gets to me. Emma was about to respond when the sound of an approaching vehicle reached them. Not the cautious approach Frank had made, but the confident rumble of someone who belonged there. Frank tensed, reaching instinctively for a weapon that wasn't there. Expecting company? He asked, his voice tight with suspicion. Emma moved to the window, peering cautiously through the curtain. Relief flooded her when she recognized Thomas Whelan's government-issue SUV pulling up to the cabin. It's my contact from the BLM, she told Frank. This might be your chance to start making things right. Frank's expression was a complex mixture of fear, resignation, and the faintest glimmer of hope. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted, the bravado of earlier completely gone. You can, Emma said with more confidence than she felt, and it might be the most important thing you ever do. Whelan approached the cabin cautiously, clearly surprised to see lights on and an unfamiliar truck parked nearby. Emma opened the door before he could knock. Dr. Sullivan, he greeted her, his eyes quickly taking in the scene behind her. Frank sitting on the sofa, the nearly empty whiskey bottle on the table. I see you have company. This is Frank Willard, Emma said, the man who had Shadow, and he has quite a story to tell you about Victor Blackwell and a large-scale operation stealing protected Mustangs for a specialized breeding program. Whelan's eyebrows rose, but he maintained his professional composure. Is that so, Mr. Willard? Frank looked up, meeting Whelan's gaze with surprising steadiness. If I talk, I need protection. Blackwell has reach, law enforcement, judges, politicians. I need guarantees. I can't make promises without hearing what you have to say first, Whelan replied, moving into the cabin and closing the door behind him. But if your information is as valuable as Dr. Sullivan suggests, I'm sure arrangements can be made. As Frank began to recount his story again, more methodically this time for Whelan's benefit, Emma felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. This was the breakthrough they needed, an insider willing to testify about Blackwell's operation, to connect the dots that had eluded authorities for years. Whelan listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions or making notes in a small notebook. His expression remained neutral, but Emma could see the excitement in his eyes as Frank detailed locations, names, dates, all the specific information that would be needed to build a case. One more thing, Whelan said when Frank had finished. The DNA test on Shadow's hair samples came back with preliminary results this afternoon. It's a match to the Wilder herd, with 99.7% certainty. That horse was definitely stolen from federally protected land. Frank nodded, unsurprised. Blackwell knew exactly which horse he wanted. Had photos, tracking data, everything. He'd been watching that stallion for months before he sent me in. This is extremely valuable information, Mr. Willard, Whelan said, closing his notebook. I'll need to contact my superiors immediately. With your testimony and the DNA evidence, we have grounds for a federal investigation. And my protection, Frank pressed. I'll recommend witness protection, yes. But you understand this won't happen overnight. There will be debriefings, formal statements, potential grand jury testimony. Frank looked down at his hands, which had begun to tremble slightly. How long? Blackwell's expecting me to report back by tomorrow, when he doesn't hear from me. We can arrange for secure temporary housing tonight, Whelan assured him. And by morning we'll have federal marshals involved. Emma watched this exchange with mixed emotions. Frank had been cruel to Shadow, had participated willingly in an illegal operation that harmed wild horses. But he was also, in his way, a victim of Blackwell's machinations, a desperate man exploited by someone with far more power and far fewer scruples. What about Dr. Sullivan? Frank asked unexpectedly. She took my horse. Technically still a crime, even if the horse was stolen to begin with. Whelan glanced at Emma. Given the circumstances and your willingness to testify that the horse was obtained illegally, I believe the charges against Dr. Sullivan can be addressed. Her actions, while outside the law, ultimately helped expose a much larger criminal enterprise. So she gets a pass? Frank's tone was hard to read, not quite resentful, but not entirely accepting either. That will be for the prosecutors to decide, Whelan replied diplomatically. But her cooperation, like yours, will certainly be taken into consideration. As the three of them prepared to leave the cabin, Frank to enter temporary protective custody, Emma to give her formal statement to the authorities, she felt a strange sense of completion. The journey that had begun with a simple act of compassion for an abused horse had led her here, to the threshold of bringing down a criminal operation that had been stealing and exploiting wild Mustangs for years. Shadow was safe. Justice was in motion. And somehow, against all odds, Emma had found her way through the storm. But as they stepped outside into the cool night air, a distant sound caught their attention, the distinctive rumble of multiple vehicles approaching along the access road. Whelan's expression sharpened, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. "Were you followed?" he asked urgently, looking from Emma to Frank. Frank's face drained of color. "Blackwell," he whispered. "He must have had someone watching me." The approaching headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the trees in harsh white light. There was no time to flee. They were coming too fast, from the only road leading away from the cabin. "Inside," Whelan ordered, drawing his weapon. "Now!" Emma's heart hammered against her ribs as they rushed back into the cabin. Whelan's calm demeanor had vanished, replaced by the focused intensity of a man assessing immediate danger. He moved with practiced efficiency, locking the door and quickly surveying the cabin's interior. "Is there another way out?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. Emma shook her head. "Just the front door and the back door. The windows are too small to climb through." Frank had gone deathly pale, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. "We're trapped," he muttered, his hands visibly shaking. "If it's Blackwell's men, they won't hesitate to kill us all." "Stay calm," Whelan instructed, drawing the curtains closed and moving to peek through a gap at the approaching vehicles. "I've called for backup, but it'll take time for them to get here. We need to hold out until then." Outside, the rumble of engines grew louder, then cut off abruptly. Headlights illuminated the clearing around the cabin, casting long shadows through the trees. Emma counted at least 3 vehicles, 2 SUVs similar to the one that had pursued them on the road, and a larger, more luxurious black sedan. 4 men from the SUVs, Whelan reported quietly, watching through the curtain. "Armed, and someone else from the sedan. Looks like our friend Blackwell himself has decided to make an appearance." Frank made a strangled noise. "If he's here in person, we're already dead." Emma moved to another window, careful to stay hidden while trying to get a glimpse of the man who had orchestrated so much suffering. Victor Blackwell was tall and distinguished-looking, with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to power. He wore an expensive coat against the night chill and directed his men with small, authoritative gestures. "Thomas Whelan," Blackwell's voice carried clearly through the night air. "I know you're in there, along with Dr. Sullivan and my former associate, Mr. Willard. I suggest you come out and discuss this situation like civilized people." Whelan didn't respond, instead moving away from the window and checking his weapon. "Standard intimidation tactic," he murmured. "He wants us off balance, afraid." "It's working," Frank whispered, sinking onto the sofa with his head in his hands. "What options do we have?" Emma asked Whelan, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. Whelan considered for a moment. "My backup won't be here for at least 30 minutes. We need to stall, keep Blackwell talking. The longer we can delay any confrontation, the better our chances." "I'm losing patience, Whelan," Blackwell called out. "Perhaps I need to motivate you. I have some interesting information about internal investigations at the Bureau of Land Management. Information that certain parties in Washington would find very enlightening." Whelan's expression hardened. "He's bluffing, trying to drive wedges between us." "Is he?" Frank looked up, his eyes haunted. "Blackwell has dirt on everyone. It's how he's operated for years. Information as leverage." Before Whelan could respond, Blackwell's voice came again, colder now. "Dr. Sullivan, I understand you've taken an interest in one of my horses, a black Mustang with rather unique genetic traits. Perhaps you'd like to know what's become of his previous offspring." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Previous offspring? Shadow was used for breeding before? Frank nodded miserably. "Blackwell had several mares brought to my place over the years. The foals were taken away as soon as they were weaned. I never knew where they went. I have quite the collection of his bloodline already," Blackwell continued, his voice taking on an almost conversational tone. "Remarkable animals. The military is particularly interested in their endurance and intelligence, but the sire himself has proven problematic, too wild, too resistant to proper training. That's why I needed him back, to complete some final crossbreeding before he outlived his usefulness." The casual cruelty in his words made Emma's stomach turn. She thought of Shadow, of his intelligent eyes and indomitable spirit, reduced to a genetic resource in Blackwell's cold calculations. "You have 30 seconds to open this door," Blackwell announced, his patience clearly wearing thin. "After that, my men will open it for you." Whelan moved to position himself with a clear line of sight to the entrance, his weapon ready. "Get behind me," he instructed Emma and Frank. "When they come in, hit the floor and stay down." Emma's mind raced, desperately seeking another option. A direct confrontation would almost certainly end badly. Whelan was outnumbered and outgunned. They needed something else, some way to turn the tables, or at least buy more time. An idea struck her, risky, possibly foolish, but better than waiting passively for Blackwell's men to break down the door. She grabbed her phone from her pocket. "What are you doing?" Whelan asked sharply. "Creating a distraction," Emma replied, quickly navigating to the video app. She selected a file she had recorded days earlier at Frank's ranch, the sound of Shadow whinnying, a distinctive call that she had captured while documenting his condition. "Time's up," Blackwell called. "Last chance." "Wait," Emma shouted, moving toward the door against Whelan's hushed objection. "I have something you want to hear, Mr. Blackwell." There was a pause, then, "I'm listening, Dr. Sullivan." Emma pressed play on the video, holding the phone near the door. Shadow's whinny, powerful, distinctive, unmistakable, rang out in the night air. "The Mustang is here," she called, "in a hidden stable behind the cabin. But if your men come crashing in, you'll spook him. He's already agitated from the journey." Another silence followed, longer this time. Emma held her breath, hoping Blackwell would take the bait. "A clever ploy, Doctor," Blackwell finally responded, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice. "But I'm not easily fooled." "It's not a ploy," Emma insisted, thinking quickly. "Frank brought him here as a peace offering. He knows he's in trouble with you. The horse is your leverage. You want Shadow, we want to walk away from this. We can make a deal." She glanced at Frank, who stared at her with a mixture of confusion and dawning understanding. Slowly, he nodded, catching on to her strategy. "It's true," Frank called out, his voice steadier than before. The horse is here. Sullivan agreed to help me get him back to you. That's why we're both here." Whelan watched this exchange with an inscrutable expression, but he didn't interfere. He understood what they were doing, buying precious minutes while his backup approached. "If the Mustang is truly here," Blackwell replied after a moment, "then Frank will bring him out, alone. The rest of you stay inside." Emma shot a panicked look at Frank. This wasn't what she had intended. But Frank's expression had changed. The defeated, fearful man was gone, replaced by someone with grim determination in his eyes. "I'll do it," he said quietly. "Keep him talking. Give the authorities time to get here." "Frank, no," Emma began, but he cut her off. "I got myself into this mess," he said. "Maybe this is how I start to make it right." He looked at Whelan. "If something happens to me, make sure they know I cooperated, that I tried to help in the end." Whelan nodded solemnly. "I'll make sure of it." Frank stood, squaring his shoulders. "I'm coming out, Blackwell," he called. "The horse is in the back. Just give me a minute to get him ready." He moved to the back door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "When I go out, I'll make a lot of noise. Pretend I'm working with the horse. That should keep their attention focused on the back of the cabin. Use that time to figure out your next move." Emma wanted to stop him, to tell him it was too dangerous, but the resolve in his face told her his mind was made up. This was his attempt at redemption, his way of atoning for years of complicity in Blackwell's crimes. Frank slipped out the back door, and immediately they heard him calling out loudly, as if to a nervous horse, "Easy, boy. Easy now. We're going for a little walk, that's all." Whelan moved to the front window, watching Blackwell and his men. "It's working," he murmured. "They're focused on the back of the cabin, 2 men moving around to intercept Frank." Emma joined him, peering through a gap in the curtains. Blackwell stood by his sedan, his attention directed toward the sounds coming from behind the cabin. He looked calm, confident, a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. Suddenly, Frank's voice rose in a convincing shout of alarm. "He's spooked. Watch out." The commotion drew everyone's attention. Even Blackwell took several steps toward the source of the disturbance, momentarily forgetting about the cabin's front door. "Now," Whelan whispered, moving swiftly to the door. "Stay behind me." They slipped out onto the porch, using the distraction Frank had created to make their way toward Whelan's SUV. They had almost reached it when a shout went up from one of Blackwell's men. "They're out front! The woman and the Fed!" Chaos erupted. Emma heard the sound of running footsteps, angry shouts, and then horrifyingly a single gunshot from behind the cabin. "Frank!" she gasped, turning instinctively toward the sound. "Get in," Whelan ordered, yanking open the SUV door and practically pushing her inside. He scrambled into the driver's seat and started the engine just as Blackwell's men rounded the corner of the cabin, weapons drawn. The SUV's tires spun in the dirt as Whelan accelerated hard, swerving to avoid a direct confrontation with the armed men. A bullet pinged off the rear quarter panel, and another shattered the side mirror. Emma ducked down in her seat, heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. They fishtailed onto the access road, Whelan handling the powerful vehicle with impressive skill. In the rearview mirror, Emma could see Blackwell's men rushing to their vehicles to give chase. "What about Frank?" she asked, her voice breaking. Whelan's expression was grim. "We'll send help back for him as soon as we reach my backup team, but right now, we need to focus on staying alive ourselves." The SUV bounced and lurched along the rough road, headlights illuminating the narrow path through the trees. Behind them, the headlights of their pursuers grew steadily brighter as the more powerful vehicles gained ground. "There's a ranger station about 10 miles ahead," Whelan said, navigating a particularly sharp curve. "My team should be approaching from that direction. If we can reach them—" His words were cut off by the jarring impact of something hitting their rear bumper. One of Blackwell's SUVs had caught up and was attempting to force them off the road. Whelan wrestled with the steering wheel, fighting to maintain control as they were hit again, harder this time. "Hold on!" he shouted as the vehicle fishtailed dangerously close to the edge of the road, where a steep embankment dropped away into darkness. Emma gripped the dashboard, bracing herself as Whelan executed a risky maneuver, abruptly slowing and then accelerating again as their pursuer overshot, momentarily giving them some breathing room. They rounded another curve, and suddenly the road ahead was filled with flashing lights, police vehicles, their light bars painting the forest in red and blue pulses. Whelan's backup had arrived. The pursuing vehicles skidded to a halt, then began backing up, attempting to retreat. But it was too late. Law enforcement officers swarmed from their vehicles, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Whelan pulled to a stop behind the police line, relief evident in his face. "Perfect timing," he murmured, reaching for his radio to coordinate with the officers on scene. Emma sat in stunned silence, the events of the past few minutes, the past few days, catching up to her in a rush. They had escaped. Blackwell and his men were being surrounded, outgunned, with nowhere to run. It was over. But what about Frank? The gunshot they had heard still echoed in her memory. "We need to go back for Frank," she insisted, as Whelan finished his radio communication. "He sacrificed himself to give us a chance. We can't leave him there." Whelan nodded, his expression solemn. "A team is already on the way to the cabin. They'll find him, Emma, and whatever happened back there, his actions tonight won't be forgotten." Within the hour, as Emma sat wrapped in a blanket in the back of an ambulance, a police officer approached with news. Frank had been found alive, though wounded. A bullet had grazed his shoulder when he'd tried to run from Blackwell's men. He was being transported to the hospital under police protection. "He kept asking about you," the officer told Emma. "Wanted to know if you got away safely." Tears welled in Emma's eyes at this unexpected concern from a man who had been her adversary just days ago. And Blackwell? In custody, along with his men. They're facing federal charges, everything from theft of protected wildlife to attempted murder of a federal officer. With Frank's testimony and the evidence from your BLM contact, it looks like a solid case. The following days passed in a blur of statements, interviews, and legal consultations. Emma learned that the charges against her for taking Shadow had been dropped in light of the circumstances and her cooperation with the federal investigation. Her veterinary license remained intact, though she faced a disciplinary review that would likely result in probation. A week after the confrontation at the cabin, Emma received permission to visit Frank in the hospital. He was recovering well, his wounded shoulder bandaged but healing. The man who greeted her was markedly different from the bitter, drunken rancher she had first encountered. There was a clarity in his eyes, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. "They're offering me a deal," he told her without preamble. "Full immunity in exchange for my testimony against Blackwell. Witness protection afterward." "That's good," Emma said, taking a seat beside his bed. "A chance to start over." Frank nodded slowly. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about doing the right thing. Maybe it's not too late after all." He hesitated, then asked the question she knew had been on his mind. "The horse, Shadow, is he really safe?" Emma smiled, pulling out her phone to show him a photo Maria had sent her the day before. Shadow running across an open meadow, his black coat gleaming in the sunlight, other Mustangs visible in the background. "See for yourself, he's where he belongs." Frank studied the image, something like wonder crossing his weathered face. "He looks free." "He is," Emma confirmed. "And so are you in a way. Free from Blackwell, free to make different choices." 2 months later, Emma stood on a ridge overlooking the sanctuary's main valley. The summer sun warmed her face as she watched a herd of Mustangs grazing in the distance. Maria stood beside her, pointing out Shadow among the group, his distinctive white marking visible even from afar. "He's become quite the leader," Maria commented. "The other horses respect him, and he's gentle with the foals, protective." Emma smiled, a sense of profound peace settling over her. The past weeks had been challenging, legal proceedings, rebuilding her reputation in the community, dealing with the emotional aftermath of her ordeal. But standing here, watching Shadow living the life he was meant to have, made every difficulty worthwhile. "The BLM has implemented new protections for the wilder herd," Maria continued. Blackwell's arrest exposed weaknesses in the system that are now being addressed, and Frank's testimony was apparently devastating, detailed accounts of years of illegal operations. "Have you heard how he's doing?" Emma asked. Frank had entered witness protection immediately after being released from the hospital. She hadn't spoken to him since. Maria shook her head. "Not directly, but I heard through Whelan that he's settled somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. Rural area, new identity. Apparently, he's working with rescue horses, using his knowledge to help rather than harm." The idea of Frank finding his own path to redemption brought a smile to Emma's face. "I'm glad." They watched in comfortable silence as Shadow broke away from the herd, trotting up a nearby slope with the confident stride of an animal that knew its own power. At the top of the ridge, he paused, head held high, surveying his domain with those intelligent eyes that had first captured Emma's heart. For a breathtaking moment, horse and human locked gazes across the distance. Then Shadow tossed his head and whinnied, a sound of pure joy, of freedom embraced, of spirit unbroken. Emma felt tears prick her eyes as the Mustang turned and galloped back to his herd, his black coat shimmering in the sunlight like polished onyx. She thought of the day she had first seen him in Frank's corral, head down, spirit dimmed by cruelty and confinement. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. "You know," Maria said softly, "in many cultures, there's a belief that animals choose us as much as we choose them, that they come into our lives for a reason, to teach us something we need to learn." Emma considered this, thinking about how Shadow had changed her life, had awakened a courage she hadn't known she possessed, had pushed her to stand up for what was right regardless of the cost. "What do you think he was trying to teach me?" she asked. Maria smiled, her eyes wise and knowing. Maybe the same lesson he refused to learn from Frank. That true strength isn't about control or domination. It's about remaining true to your nature, even when the world tries to break you. As they turned to leave, Emma took one last look at Shadow, now grazing peacefully among his new family. The Mustang had been mistreated every day of his captivity, his spirit nearly crushed under the weight of human cruelty and greed. But an unexpected twist, her intervention born of compassion and a refusal to look away from suffering, had changed everything. For Shadow, for Frank, for Blackwell and his criminal enterprise, and most of all, for Emma herself. The mistreated Mustang was finally free, and in fighting for his freedom, Emma had found her own.